Hey everyone, welcome to the Daily Objective. And we're going to be talking about the situation in Israel today. That's a country that not a lot of people can actually identify on the map, but it seems to be in the news so very often. There's a new prime minister in Israel, recently elected, Naftali Bennett. I think he might be the first religious Orthodox Jew to be elected prime minister of Israel, but his method of getting elected was not orthodox. I guess, aligned himself with a bunch of other parties that are either on the left, on the Islamist party, just like basically ganged up with a bunch of not like-minded parties in order to get out Netanyahu. So I'm sure one of my co-hosts will tell me more about what happened in Israel, and we got two co-hosts here to help me figure out what the heck is going on over there. All I know about this Bennett guy is he's the first prime minister to wear a yarmulke, even if he sort of wears it in the back of his head. He's the first YouTuber, I think, prime minister. He's been known to go on CNN and own the libs and all of that. So he's made a lot of viral content. He recently reacted to Trevor Noah and Gigi Hadid with kind of a YouTube video that's sort of like Andrew Schultz, Mark Pellegrino style of video. You know, he's talking, you got pictures moving in and out, stuff like that. So he's the first YouTuber prime minister in a sense. He's sort of on the free market side, sort of on the hawkish side, at least in his rhetoric. But of course, he justifies Israel's legitimacy in ways that I don't like. He talks in terms of 3,000 years of history. That's not why Israel is a legitimate state worthy of self-defense. You should just point out this is a free country, and anyone who fires a missile at this free country needs to be aware of what they're getting themselves into. Anyway, let's talk to the other host here today. We've got a guy who, I don't know if he's Jewish. I don't think he is. But if they ever want to make a cool movie about Naftali Bennett, and he's willing to shave most of his hair off and tape a yarmulke to the back of his head, he just might be able to pull it off. Please welcome Mark Pellegrino.
What's up? Yes, I'm in talks for the part right now, as a matter of fact.
Awesome. And we've got a guy who, I hate to say it, might be able to play one of the Hamas operatives with his current facial hair situation. Please welcome the man normally behind the scenes, your favorite, a guy who you love to send super chats when he's on to encourage him to host more frequently, Razi Ginsburg.
Hey, Rucka. Hey, Mark.
Hey.
So, Razi, what's going on? Can you sort of summarize the situation? This is an unpopular party that just now became the ruler of the whole country.
Yeah, I can try to summarize it to whatever limited extent I actually understand it. So, yeah, you mentioned, there's some good, there's some bad about Bennett himself. He is the first prime minister who wears a yarmulke. He is more religious than any previous prime minister. He is, I think, also quite free market oriented, at least compared to others in politics. But I think the most important thing here is that his party has 6 of the seats of the 120 seats in Israel's parliament, the Knesset. So he has 5% of all members of parliament, and this is a parliamentary system. You have to get everything through the parliament. So the vote yesterday, there's a lot to try to decipher about Israel's system and how somebody with so few seats can be prime minister. But the vote yesterday for the government, all 120 members voted. 60 voted for this government, 59 voted against, and 1 abstained. So, it literally will take one person changing their mind about something for this government to fall. And within the coalition agreement, there are all sorts of things kind of preventing that or making it more difficult. But it could happen, and I go out on a limb and say it likely will happen. So there are 8 parties in this coalition, and Bennett's party, which is called Yamina, which means to the right or rightwards, or however you want to translate it, is if we can somehow look at a left-right spectrum in Israel, is a party that is to the right of Netanyahu's Likud party, but the other 7 coalition partners are all to the left of Netanyahu, and they're as left as you can possibly go, including an Islamist party, which has never been in any coalition, nor did anybody ever think of having them in a coalition prior to these 2.5 years with 4 election campaigns. And so yeah, when we talk about him being religious or being free market oriented, it's not that he can pass anything pretty much without the approval of people who are on the classical left, on the Islamist, whatever you want to call it. So the one thing that brought this coalition together it is only one thing, is Netanyahu and their shared desire to see him out of power, which they have accomplished. But I wonder, spite can unite people, but I wonder how long it could keep them together, and I think not very long.
Can I ask you guys a question from the outside here? What about Netanyahu inspired such loathing from these people to kick him out?
Razi?
Well, I think much of it is that there are several corruption charges against him, and there's him holding on to power. I think that's pretty much it. I don't think it's very much anything to do with his policies, although people in the chat can correct me if there's anything super objectionable in his policies as opposed to the other options in Israeli politics. Of course, we can object to his policies, but I don't think if we had a party we would cross the threshold into parliament. So
now, do you think? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It was kind of a wisecrack, unless the objectivist party aligns themselves with everyone else and sort of outnumbers the sitting party. But go ahead, Mark. You had a question, or?
Oh, there's an objectivist party in parliament?
No, but if there was, because that's what Naftali Bennett's party apparently did. He sort of aligned himself with a bunch of people to kind of win by technicality in a weird way.
Okay, so they win by technicality now, but what does this mean? You have an extremely unstable alliance governing. Does that make for any policy going forward? Does it do anything to the policies respecting, say, Hamas and what's going on in the West Bank, or does it just disintegrate from its own weight within a matter of months? Where do you think this goes?
Probably, yeah, the latter. That would be my assumption, that it will disintegrate. I would be very interested to see what would happen if Hamas decides to fire rockets now, because what is the Islamist party going to do if Bennett implements the policies that he's been advocating for in his entire political career, which is a much stronger military response than we've seen from Netanyahu. So, and I don't know how he can do that. By the way, a step back, and the way he actually became prime minister is because the leader of the second largest party, Yair Lapid, was, when Netanyahu couldn't form a coalition of 61, it fell on the leader of the second largest party. And as part of the agreement, Bennett would be prime minister for 2 years, and then Lapid will be prime minister from August 2023. So, yeah, if this coalition holds, Bennett will remove himself from the role of prime minister in 2 years.
Well, tell me something. I'm completely ignorant about the way the parliamentary system works as opposed to our bicameral system here with a sort of duopoly, a partisan duopoly, where very few other ideas are represented except the two prominent ones. Are these coalitions formed within government, or do people vote for these coalitions popularly? And
no, people just vote for a party, and you get as many seats. The number of seats you get is based on the percentage of the vote you get. So you get 10% of the vote, you get 12 seats in parliament. There is a threshold, which is 3 point something percent. So the minimum number of seats you can have now is 4. in the past they didn't have that. There were parties that were elected with one seat. But yeah, so this is how you get. I don't know how many parties are actually in parliament right now, but it's more than 10.
So the electorate votes for a party, then they go into the government, and then they fight amongst themselves in a sort of spoil system to see who takes command, who takes the helm of the government at that point.
Yeah, and that's what has always been interesting, but this time is especially interesting because of how supposedly different the views are of the different parties. So people voted for Bennett probably because, for the most part, because he was sort of a religious Zionist and the let's say less insane option among religious Zionists. There was another party that has some hardcore racists among that party. So if you're going to vote for religious Zionists, Bennett was the better choice. But now he's in this coalition with people of the very far left within among Israeli Jews, and again an Islamist party that I don't understand. I mean, they can vote together on certain things, certain religious legislation, but that's pretty much it. How they're going to agree on defense policy is something that's going to be interesting to observe.
Yeah, and like it's not like American politics, like it's not like House of Cards, whereas like Kevin Spacey becomes president by technicality, and now he's got 4 years of being president. It's every 2 weeks there's another election. Anytime no one can agree on anything, it just seems like the Israelis have another election. So what does it even mean to win? I don't know. I don't get it. It's very unstable. I watched the victory speech, or the incoming sort of the speech by Naftali Bennett he gave to the Knesset, and I saw Netanyahu's outgoing speech where he was basically bragging about all his accomplishments, throwing a lot of shade at the incoming administration. It's nothing like the American temperament. In America, you're supposed to show some dignity. Over there, the audience is booing and interrupting, and the outgoing prime minister is throwing shade and saying how much the incoming one is going to fail. That was.
I feel like America's gone that way over the past 4 years, though, don't you?
We're definitely on our way, but it's. I mean, imagine the inaugural speech being interrupted by congressmen like heckling. I mean, it's just like insane. So it's very, very sloppy and very undignified in that respect. And Netanyahu missed an opportunity because at one point he breaks into English and he says, "We'll be back. We'll be back soon," and he should have said, to quote Arnold Schwarzenegger in Commando, "I'll be back, Bennett." That would have been a good zinger. So should have hired me. Got a couple super chats. Jonathan Honig with $9.99 says, "More Razi." We hear you. We hear you loud and clear. Christopher with $2.79 Canadian says, "New prime minister on his own, more hardline than Netanyahu." I think referring to the military strategy. I mean, Netanyahu, outside of power, is also very hardline. He wrote a book, didn't he, about being hawkish and how important that is. But then once you're in that position, now you're on the world stage, and you need to really figure out if you're going to, devastate the region where these rockets are coming from, or if you're going to let everybody know, get out of this building so we can hit the rocket launchers and target the specific leaders wherever they are. So, I guess we'll see if there is another outburst of violence during Bennett's tenure. We'll find out if he's going to walk the walk or if he just talks the talk. But yeah, he does talk. He does talk tough, right, Razi?
Yeah, and also Yair points out in the chat that Gidon Saar's party is also considered right-wing. So yeah, there are two parties that are considered right-wing. I don't know if he's considered to the right of Netanyahu, because I remember when he was still in the Likud, he was running in the primaries against Netanyahu, and I was basically trying my best to understand what he disagrees with Netanyahu on policy-wise, but it was mostly, we need change and nothing of substance was in there. And There was something else in the chat that I wanted to mention, but I will look at it in a second. Yeah, you mentioned what went on yesterday in the Knesset, in Israel's parliament. Yeah, I was watching that. I mean, there's often shouting. Yesterday was um, unusual and pretty barbaric and obviously pre-planned. And Netanyahu's speech, that was saying things like we will publicly disagree with the U.S. president on the day that you're leaving office is much easier than doing so when you're still clearly in office and trying to stay in office. So now that he's leader of the opposition, Netanyahu will once again have the best policies like he had in the books that he's written. But we have 12 years in a row and 15 years in total of him as prime minister to know better than to think that what he says is what he'll do when he's prime minister. And something else in that speech was he was talking about how Bennett isn't going to be tough on Iran, and he one of the things he accused Bennett in advance of not doing is not doing these covert operations. I mean, Israel does these things occasionally in enemy territory that it doesn't officially take responsibility for. And again, Netanyahu on his way out is saying, all these mysterious explosions that happen in Iran's nuclear plants, have that's us. So, yeah. It's unfortunate that Netanyahu isn't as strong a leader as he is a leader of the opposition.
So when I've seen Naftali Bennett speaking, first he was talking about free market solutions. So one of the things he mentioned, which was interesting, is that he wants to create a more of a competitive field in verifying that food is kosher. So I guess currently there's basically one or two government appointed institutions that they inspect the food preparing process, and they say this restaurant or this company is or is not certified kosher. And Bennett is going to make it more competitive. So I guess allow more kind of institutions to spring up and compete, which is interesting. It's almost like saying I'm going to have more, like privatize the FDA in a sense. So even though I'm not crazy about people wanting their food to be kosher to begin with, I like the idea of sort of privatizing the field and letting people decide for themselves which institution they trust. Robert with the $5 super chat says, I don't know anything about Israel's prime minister. Here's some money. Hey, all you chat scrubs like me who know nothing too, bring it. Thanks, Robert. You're learning at your own pace. So yeah, sounds like Bennett is a free market guy. Basically, I mean, comparatively, he speaks in those terms at least. And he's hawkish. He speaks in those terms. It's sad and maybe does more harm than good that he does it all in the name of religion, basically, or that's a big part of it. He's inseparable from religion. He's inseparable. He's not the type of religious, ultra-Orthodox Jew who hates the state of Israel. He's very much the opposite. To him, Zionism and religion are sort of blended together. And the Jewish people have a birthright to be there. So he's not defending Israel in the way that, let's say, like the objectivists defend Israel. They say Israel is relatively free, overwhelmingly relatively free, and an individualistic state. So therefore, in any conflict with barbarians, Israel very much deserves moral support. No, for him, he mostly emphasizes the history of the Jews in the region and the Old Testament and et cetera, et cetera. So it's always those false premises that end up biting you later on and completely invalidating the cause, doesn't it? It's just like justifying capitalism on religious grounds. That type of alliance does not last forever.
Yeah, the religion issue is going to be interesting here because as you mentioned, the ultra-Orthodox, there's two main ultra-Orthodox parties, and they are pretty much always a part of the coalition, and that's how they sustain themselves. They have these education systems that are government funded. They have a very weird system of child benefits, where from a certain number of children you get more benefit, more money per child, which pretty much makes it a business of its own. And they are panicking. This is one of the positive things about this coalition, is they're very, very much panicking about a coalition that they're not a part of. And there have always been differences between the sort of Zionist religious parties and the ultra-Orthodox parties that are really not Zionist, and some of them probably don't really want the state of Israel to exist, or aren't big supporters of it.
Yeah. Also, Christopher with $2.79 Canadian says, here's this for the dog. Okay, that's a beard. His name is Razi. Please don't disrespect him like that. So, the settlements are a big contentious issue when it comes to the Arab-Israeli conflict. People, they act like, oh, that's why the Palestinians keep erupting into violence. It's because of these settlements. Israel is aggressing. They're expanding their borders. So it would be great to have a good defense, or a good sort of a way to look at the settlements and say, well, first of all, property should not be appropriated from anyone. But also, like, Israel, Israelis building something is not the same as them taking land away from anyone. There's a good way to talk about the settlements. I like what Yaron Brook says. He says, if the Palestinians wanted to live free and prosper, they would welcome settlements. They would say, great, here comes prosperity and civilization. Now, people like Naftali Bennett mostly says, this is our land anyway. Look at the Old Testament, Judea and Samaria, he calls the West Bank, right? It's Judea and Samaria. So that kind of defense of the settlements basically requires people to be fans of the Bible, doesn't it? Or like to look at things in those terms, like which group of people was here longer, and we need to trace it back. What if it turns out the Palestinians are Canaanites? What if it turns out Yasser Arafat and the people over in Hamas, they descend from Canaan? Canaan, they were displaced when the Hebrews arrived, exiting Egypt. Right? So now they get the land. It's a stupid way to justify.
No, because they still rejected the one true God, although it's the same God, but they added.
Good point. But anyway, it's such can you believe we're adults in the world today arguing about, well, which group of people was there earlier? Going back thousands of years. Can we just look at the situation now? Is it that hard for people to see that a free country should not have to deal with shenanigans like this?
It is because people are tribalistic now, so they don't seem to relate ownership or a state to ideas anymore. It's about squatters' rights, who's there, what group of people inhabited it the quote unquote longest. I don't know. Certainly not a standard that any objectivist measures ownership by.
Yeah, any proper objectivist, I think, doesn't look at it in terms of which tribe, which family, basically, which extended family was there longer. There's just so much wrong with the world today. So people, they see heritage as a big deal. Everyone find out, get your DNA test. I hear commercials for those DNA tests. I hear Ryan Seacrest, the face of pop culture, saying, order this test and find out what makes you you. If Hitler said this, people would say that sounds normal, expected. But this is a mainstream thing to say. Find out what makes you you. Get a DNA test and find out what percentage Italian versus Nordic versus, well, maybe those are the same, versus Middle Eastern versus African versus Asian. That's what makes you you, evidently. So that's how people look at things today. It's people, they think it's childish to talk about individualism. They say, yeah, individualism is cute, but let's be adults about this. We all have our in-group. We all have our family, basically our community, and everyone talks about this community, that community. So basically we've got a side saying the Jewish community has a right to be there because they were there much earlier, according to ancient records and the Old Testament. If that's the best defense Israel has, Israel is in trouble. And it's time to wake up, folks. So I would offer you to look at the namesake of this organization, the Ayn Rand Center UK. just kind of squint, cross your eyes, remove Center UK from it, and just see what's left. And then read stuff by that author, as well as join as a member of the Ayn Rand Center UK to get better understanding of the ideas, study groups, and exclusive content, and help this thing grow and reach more people. Because the good news is Israel is so small that it only really takes like 10 of them to really take objectivism seriously to the point where they can break free of this tribalistic mindset and bring the Enlightenment into the universities over there.
I did have a positive point about Bennett that I wanted to mention, which is before he became prime minister, he was actually successful in the real world. You know, he was in tech, he made a lot of money, and that's I think it's rare in politics generally. People kind of have a lifelong career in government and end up in politics. It's even more rare in Israel. I mean, in Israel, usually you have a long military career and then you go into politics, or you have a career in journalism. So of the 8 parties in the coalition, 4 are led by former journalists. So well done to Bennett for being successful in the real world, and hopefully you can.
Just shows you how important wordsmithing is to politics over practical experience and principle.
Yeah, and it also shows you that because the people who are journalists and go into politics are almost always of the left. So it does tell you something about the media.
Yeah, and in a culture where a great career option is to go into politics, a lot of ambitious people do that. In America, Washington, D.C. is one of the top destinations for young, ambitious people. It's sad. It shouldn't be that way, but that's what a lobby system brings us. You can have a great career, lucrative career in politics. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot I like about this Bennett guy. It just makes me wonder, are his worst elements basically going to be married to his good elements, which ends up doing more harm in the long term? That's always the question. So
yeah, although as I mentioned, with him, the question is also, will we see any of the elements, good or bad, or will the fact that he has so few of the seats in the coalition, a tenth of them, will that mean that basically he can't do anything he wants, good or bad?
Well, good times.
But I wanted to ask you, Rucka, you mentioned at the beginning that he did short videos in the past, like Mark. What are you referring to in Mark's case?
Mark's case, he's doing a series called Reality Check, where it's just a guy, his blue screen, some flashing pictures and words, and he basically gives you his opinion. So if you like what you've seen here from Mark, you're going to love his channel called Reality Check. Go subscribe, hit that like button, hit that notification bell, leave comments, and share it with everybody, because this is about to be it. I mean, Naftali Bennett's going to be watching this for notes on his next video series.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, everybody. This was a nice little discussion. I learned a little bit. Hope you all did as well. And we're going to jump over to Clubhouse. Thank you for all the super chats and support. Please join us back here for something later on. Actually, tomorrow. Okay. So today, coming up in an hour and a half from now, we've got HBTV, the hot new series that no one can get enough of, Harry Binswanger TV. Obviously, that's huge. And then if that wasn't enough, tomorrow, Yaron Brook returns for his debate series, where he's going to be debating. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be Yaron Brook versus Adam Smith, in a sense, like objectivism versus the more traditional justification of capitalism. That to me is rich. That to me is where the rub. That's the rub, as Jordan Peterson once put it.
And his opponent in that debate is Eamon Butler, who is the founder and director of the Adam Smith Institute in the UK, which is, I think it won like top think tank in the world or something like that. It's a very big think tank or very well known. So
I'm really looking forward to that. And maybe Naftali Bennett might, someone send him a link to it so he'll see you. Capitalism, it's about premises. It is about ethics at the end of the day, if it's going to succeed or fail. Thank you all. And also, obviously, we'll be back here same time tomorrow for the Daily Objective. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Razi. Go ahead.
Thank you.
yeah, I think Mark, you had another announcement, but we are out of time, so we'll save that for Thursday, right?
Okay.
Yeah, people tune in to the Daily Objective every day, but also on Thursday for a special
An announcement. Big announcement. All right. See you guys on Clubhouse in just a moment. And